Okay, this is insane. Just how is this little Xiaomi 15 in balanced mode in hot April weather handily outperforming this big iQOO 13 in monster mode in much cooler weather of late January? This video will be super interesting. Hey, what's going on everybody? Diptesh here. Welcome back to the channel. So, everybody wants to buy a smaller form factor flagship phone. And it's true because flagships these days are getting so big that it's getting very unwieldy, uncomfortable, in fact, impractical to really drive them. So this is the Xiaomi 15, which I've been using since the last 3 days or so. And every time I pick up this phone, it's like a breath of fresh air. It's because of the form factor. But with smaller phone comes some compromises, particularly two weaknesses. The first weakness is pretty much present in the spec sheet and people are aware of it before buying it, and that is the battery capacity. It's a smaller phone, doesn't have enough space, so the battery size is typically smaller. And the other issue that people don't tend to know before buying the phone and only realize after buying the phone is the thermal situation. Now, with the use of silicon carbon battery technology, the first problem of having a smaller battery size in a smaller phone has been solved. This Xiaomi 15 is a significantly smaller phone than something like the Galaxy S25 Ultra, which is a much bigger phone than the Xiaomi 15. It's actually one of the biggest flagships around. And despite being a much smaller phone than the Galaxy S25 Ultra, the Xiaomi 15 packs a larger battery capacity, which is pretty incredible. And in my preliminary day-to-day tests, the battery life on the Xiaomi 15 has been really good. Like I am mostly on Wi-Fi and I just have zero, issues with the battery life of this phone. And not to mention the fact that this phone also charges in like 45 minutes with the 90-watt adapter in the box. So battery life is great as well as charging is super fast. So battery life is not even a concern with this compact phone. But what's not been fixed and what's pretty hard to fix is the limitations with thermodynamics. It's a small phone. It has a much smaller surface area to dissipate heat. It is passively cooled. It doesn't have any kind of, active cooling or a fan built into the phone to cool it. So in terms of thermals, especially in a tropical, hot country like India, a smaller compact, especially a flagship phone like this, it is possible that it can get much hotter compared to these larger flagships even while doing day-to-day operations. So in this video, I'm going to talk about the thermal situation of the Xiaomi 15. Like what is it like to use the Xiaomi 15 in day-to-day, doing regular tasks? Like how hot does it get? Does it even get hot at all? And also, we are going to run some extreme tests on the Xiaomi 15 to test its thermal throttling characteristics. How does it perform under 100% load? At what point does the Xiaomi 15 throttle when we hit it with some extreme test cases? I have also tested the Xiaomi 15 with this phone cooler to test how it affects the performance and thermals. Does it really improve the performance thermals? We'll find out. I'm also going to compare the Xiaomi 15 with my iQOO 13, which I had in the past. I don't have it anymore, to see how the Xiaomi 15 compares against the iQOO 13, which is a much bigger phone than the Xiaomi 15, and the iQOO 13 is also marketed as a, performance oriented flagship phone. So we'll see how the iQOO 13 and the Xiaomi 15 differs, in terms of performance, sustained performance, and particularly in terms of thermal throttling behavior. So this is going to be a pretty interesting video, so stick around till the end. There are some shocking findings. It is really exciting, trust me. But before all that, if you're new to the channel, please make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. I am an independent tech content creator. I make non-sponsored reviews, so your support is much appreciated. With that said, let's get going. Okay, so let's get straight to the point. Does the Xiaomi 15 get hot in day-to-day usage? Well, the answer is not simple. It depends. Now, it's India we're talking about, and it's not even peak summer, and we're already in the 35 to 36 degrees centigrade range. So keep that in mind. And I'm mostly on Wi-Fi, and in my day-to-day usage, like if you're talking about, just browsing the internet, chatting on WhatsApp, you're browsing social media like Reddit, Facebook, or you're browsing Flipkart, Amazon, this type of activity, the Xiaomi 15 barely gets any warm. It gets slightly warm, but it's totally normal. Again, it's a summer season. It gets very slightly warm, and it's not even a concern. It's totally normal in my opinion. When it starts to get slightly warm is when you start playing YouTube videos, particularly if you're playing HDR YouTube videos, or if you're playing YouTube videos and using the picture-in-picture mode to multitask, like you're, browsing YouTube, you're watching a YouTube video, you're using picture-in-picture, and at the same time you're browsing, you're using all your multitasking applications like browsing Reddit, social media, texting, stuff like that. if you're multitasking like this while playing a YouTube video in picture-in-picture mode. That's when you start to see that the Xiaomi 15 is getting slightly warmer. Like nothing alarming, but it is enough to make you notice. Okay, so keep that in mind. Like your palm starts to feel a little warm. Like you notice it. Again, remember that the ambient temperature itself is warm. Like the air around me is already warm. So this is kind of expected. It is a heavier load. So now compared to my iQOO 13, which I don't have anymore, I do think that the Xiaomi 15 gets a bit warmer compared to the iQOO 13 doing the same amount of task. And I cannot give you an apples to apples comparison because, like I said, I don't have the iQOO 13 anymore. I used the iQOO 13 in January, February when the temperature, like the ambient temperature, was much cooler than what it is now. So I can't give you an apples to apples comparison, but I still feel that the Xiaomi 15 is slightly bit warmer than the iQOO 13 doing the same tasks like what I just described. So yeah, it's a smaller phone, so that makes sense. The iQOO 13 was a significantly larger phone than the Xiaomi 15. When the Xiaomi 15 starts to gain temperature pretty quickly is when you start to use the camera. In fact, if you use the camera for a prolonged period of time, the Xiaomi 15 can get pretty hot. So, you open the camera, the phone is cool. Let's say the phone is cool. You open the camera, you take 4-5 shots, and you immediately notice that the Xiaomi 15 is starting to get warm. Okay. And the more you use, the more you switch between the various modes, the more photos you click, and particularly the more videos you shoot, especially 4K videos, in this kind of weather conditions, the phone will definitely start to get warm and eventually it'll get pretty hot, in a few minutes of, shooting videos particularly. So that is something that just cannot be avoided with the Xiaomi 15. That's what I observed. I mean, this is normal for any phone. Like even my iQOO 13 used to get hot when I used to take photos and videos outside, and that was a much bigger phone. And even the weather was cooler at that time, so that is pretty normal. But yeah, it is just my experience that I'm sharing. The Xiaomi 15 does get hot when you use, you use its camera for a prolonged period of time, especially if you shoot videos. Now, do note I'm talking about directly touching the phone without a case on. Okay. Now, if you have a case on the phone, okay, you're not going to feel the temperature rise immediately because obviously you have a case on. So keep that in mind. Now, the good thing is that the Xiaomi 15 actually also drops in temperature quickly. So if you stop using the phone for some time, it'll cool down pretty quickly. So that's good. Like so, combined with a case, like if you're using the phone, chilling, just browsing the web, social media and stuff like that, and then you pull out the camera and take a few photos, and then you keep it to rest for 5-6 minutes, and then you pick it up again. In this case, right, you are not going to really observe the sudden rise in temperature that much because the phone it's able to cool itself down pretty quickly, and you won't really notice it. Only when you're at prolonged use, like you're using multiple apps, watching videos, doing multitasking, and then open the camera, take photos, videos. If you keep using the phone for a prolonged period of time like this, at that time you will notice that the phone is getting like pretty warm, and then you have to stop using it, give it some rest. So yeah, that's what I would say is my day-to-day experience with the Xiaomi 15. Again, remember I am on Wi-Fi. If you use mobile data like 4G LTE or 5G, it will become even more hot. That is normal for every phone. So I just tend to use Wi-Fi most of the time. So that is my experience, and I do recommend using the battery saver mode. This phone has a battery saver mode. If you're outside, I would recommend using the battery saver mode. You can actually use 120 hertz as well as keep the haptics enabled when using the battery saver mode. So that's pretty good. So I do recommend using the battery saver mode if you're like outside most of the time and you're shooting videos in the sun or something like that. So yeah. So overall, what's the situation with the Xiaomi 15 with day-to-day usage? I would say it's fine. If you're browsing, watching videos, all this type of stuff, the temperature is fine. Even in this 35-37 degrees centigrade temperature, I would say it's fine. If you give it some rest, it will cool down pretty quickly, and then again you can use it. But if you're using a lot of camera, taking a lot of videos, then yeah, it would get hot, and then you would need to give it some rest for sure. This is just unavoidable. I think even flagship phones get hot, in the summer like this. But this is again even a smaller phone, so it gets a bit more hot, a bit quicker. So that's what I say. This is my genuine thoughts about the day-to-day usage of the Xiaomi 15 in terms of thermals. So it's a smaller phone. You can't avoid the fact that it gets a bit hotter quicker. Okay, so there's that. Now let's get into the interesting bit. How does the Xiaomi 15 perform, and when does it exactly throttle when you hit it with some extreme load? Now, I would like to stress the fact that this is an unrealistic scenario. These kind of tests are performed to see like what kind of thermal throttling characteristics does a phone have? What is its peak performance? How long does it sustain its peak performance? These are tests performed with at like 100% load on the CPU or the GPU. Okay, which is something you will not face in your day-to-day lives, and you will not face even in the most demanding games that is currently available for Android. So this is just a test that we perform to test the limits of the phone. It is not necessarily synonymous to day-to-day usage or even actual gaming. Keep this in mind. Now, all these tests are performed in the balanced mode of the phone. There is a performance mode, but trust me, just don't even bother with the performance mode. Okay, so let's run the 3D Mark Wildlife Stress Test, which is a 4K benchmark, and check out the results. Okay, so the test is over and here are the results. And this is actually quite impressive from a performance standpoint. But do you know how impressive this is? Check the scores from the much bigger iQOO 13. Shockingly, the iQOO 13, despite being a much larger phone than the Xiaomi 15, is actually crushed in terms of performance. Just take a look. The iQOO 13 throttles hard immediately in the second loop. The difference is so big that the iQOO 13's performance just in the second minute of the test, as each of these loops are a minute long, is worse than the Xiaomi 15's performance in the 7th minute or the 7th loop. In fact, the Xiaomi 15 maintains significantly higher performance for the first 9 minutes, which is almost half of this extremely intensive 20-minute stress test. That is crazy coming from a significantly smaller phone. What's even more amazing is how well the Xiaomi 15 responds to a cooler. With the cooler attached, the Xiaomi 15 gained 14% improvement to the lowest loop score, which is a massive difference. So why is the Xiaomi 15 performing so well? Surely it must cost something. And yes, it does. I'll talk about that at the end of the performance analysis. Now, let's get to the next test. And this is my preferred way of testing for peak performance and sustained performance of thermal throttling. So what is this? This is Grid Legends. This is a 2022 console game recently ported to Android and iOS, and this is the most demanding game on Android at the moment. There are other demanding games, but this game particularly maxes out the GPU of the Snapdragon 8 Elite without being unoptimized. I don't like testing unoptimized games in terms of this kind of tests because it just introduces too many variables and you never know whom to blame, whether to blame the phone or the processor or the game itself. Now, there are a couple of changes that I make to the internal graphical configuration of this game for consistent accurate testing. This game using the graphics preset is capped to 30 FPS on Android, and this game also uses dynamic resolution. Now, having dynamic resolution enabled will absolutely make this test invalid, as you never know what resolution the game is getting rendered at the moment. So I basically make 3 changes by modifying the preference file of this game. First, I lift the FPS cap from 30 FPS to 60 FPS for the graphics preset. Then I disable dynamic resolution, and finally I set a fixed internal rendering resolution, which is as close as possible between the two devices that I'm comparing. This ensures that the comparison is absolutely fair and accurate. I test 10 loops, that's nearly 30 minutes, with a total of 22 cars and used the storm weather condition to test for maximum CPU and GPU load at the same time. Now, I will also compare the performance against the iQOO 13, but keep in mind, like I said earlier, the iQOO 13 performance footage is from the end of January because I don't have the phone anymore. I'm sorry, I just can't have over 1 lakh worth of phones at the same time with me at the moment of my career. Okay, so the keep in mind the iQOO 13 performance tests and the video is from the end of January, when the weather was much cooler than currently. So at the moment in this particular comparison, the iQOO 13 has a couple of big advantages. Number one, the iQOO 13 is a much bigger phone than the Xiaomi 15, so it can dissipate the heat more effectively. And also the iQOO 13 was tested in much cooler weather conditions. But spoiler alert, you will be pretty shocked by the end of the test when you see the results. Okay, so let's start the race and I'll catch you at the end with the results. Now, this is shocking. The Xiaomi 15, despite being a much smaller phone, being tested in much hotter conditions, still ended up with better sustained performance with much better smoothness, higher 5% lows, and lower fluctuation in FPS compared to the iQOO 13. And somehow, the Xiaomi 15 also sustained higher power throughout the test. But you know what's even more impressive? With the fan attached, the Xiaomi 15 provided me with the best performance that I've ever seen till now in my customized Grid Legends test. A 12% improvement in the average FPS with nearly 98% smoothness. The cooler worked so well with the Xiaomi 15 that it was able to sustain 18% higher power as well. This is very impressive. Okay, so finally, how is the Xiaomi 15 performing so well despite being a much smaller phone and being tested in much hotter temperatures compared to the iQOO 13? And the answer is in the sustained temperatures. And holy crap, the Xiaomi 15 sustained close to 49 degrees centigrade. That is insane. You should not hold your phone when it's this hot. In fact, you cannot hold your phone at these temps. Now, the iQOO 13 throttled much quickly at around 42 degrees centigrade despite having the advantage of being a bigger phone and tested in lower ambient temperatures. This is why I am a bit disappointed with the iQOO 13. Despite being in monster mode, it throttles way too quickly. It's marketed as a performance focused phone, and despite being in its best performance mode, it still does not perform as per expectations and lags behind phones like the OnePlus 13. Now remember the phone cooler that I used? It works super well. It was able to dissipate the heat very effectively, never allowing the phone to even touch 45 degrees centigrade, all the while maintaining higher power draw and performance. This is why I am very impressed with the way the Xiaomi 15 responds to a phone cooler. With the phone cooler, the Xiaomi 15 was actually close to the iQOO 13 in terms of the temperatures. And remember, the iQOO 13 was tested in the end of January when the weather was much cooler. So what does all this mean? Well, the Xiaomi 15 simply has a much higher thermal throttling temperature compared to the iQOO 13. So let's say in the future, if there is a game or a software that can push the Snapdragon 8 Elite to its limits, in that case, the Xiaomi 15 will be able to, or you can say it's programmed to sustain a much higher thermal throttling temperature and will provide you with a longer peak performance compared to the iQOO 13, which in my case, or in my opinion, on the flip side, is a lot more conservative than it should be. Okay, it's marketed as a enthusiast performance oriented phone, but it just throttles way too quickly. It is way too conservative, and as a result it results in lesser performance compared to similarly sized phones like the OnePlus 13. So in my opinion, the iQOO 13 should actually, be a bit more aggressive in terms of the performance. Because I'm playing in monster mode, I want the best performance. I could play in balanced mode if I cared about temperatures. So that is something that I'm disappointed about with the iQOO 13. On the other hand, I think Xiaomi 15 is going a bit too much above and beyond. I think Xiaomi should update the thermal throttling temperature and pull it down from 49 degrees centigrade to 45 degrees centigrade. I think 49 degrees centigrade is a bit too much in my opinion. Okay. Now again, do remember, the test that I did is an extreme test. Grid Legends out of the box is limited to 30 FPS in the graphics priority mode and also has dynamic resolution enabled. So in real world, when you download Grid Legends from the Play Store and you play it, it won't be as demanding as it is in my test. Absolutely not. Your phone will not get as hot as it did, in my test. My test was, modified and customized to show these differences, like where does the phone throttle, what is the throttling temperature, what is the peak performance, how long does it sustain the peak performance. So my test was for that. In real world, you will not face this kind of issues. I'm pretty sure about that. But to be honest, the best takeaway from the tests that I performed, all these tests that I performed, is the fact that how well the Xiaomi 15, responds to having, a phone controller. Like this kind of controller on the Xiaomi 15, it simply allows you for so much more performance. At the same time, it drastically drops the temperatures, which is just amazing to see. I don't know why exactly the phone cooler performs so well on the Xiaomi 15. Maybe because the Xiaomi 15 is a smaller phone, so the phone cooler is able to, cover a bigger region of the phone and cool it down. But it's super I'm super impressed with how this phone cooler behaved on the Xiaomi 15, or I could say how the Xiaomi 15 responded to the phone cooler. I think buying one of those telescopic game pads with a built-in cooler can be a great investment for those people who are buying the Xiaomi 15 for playing games. Do let me know if you want to see such a video. I may get one of those telescopic game controllers with a cooler built in and test it on the Xiaomi 15. So yeah. Alright guys, that's it for this video. Do let me know what you thought about all these results. Do you like my testing style? Do you think I'm a bit too technical, or like what do you think? What are your feedback? I tend to do these kinds of tests because I have another channel, Diptesh Loves Tech, where I test PCs and laptops. So in there, it's imperative that I become a lot more objective, and so that style carries over to my phone analysis videos. So do let me know what you thought about this and what you think about the Xiaomi 15. I think this is pretty good. Like this is summer season and it is doing pretty well. It is hotter than usual compared to those large phones, but that is expected. It is not something crazy. I think it is definitely tolerable. So yeah, do let me know what you thought about this video, guys. And please make sure to hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. I make independent, non-sponsored videos. These are all my phones. I purchase this with my own money, so your support is much appreciated. I don't want any donations or anything like that, at least now. So your support is much appreciated, so please consider supporting, and also turn on all notifications because a lot more content is coming on the Xiaomi 15 and you don't want to miss any of that. With that said, guys, thank you so much for watching. Take care and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.